from our hearts. Perhaps a little bit like a good parent with their family. Sometimes firm, sometimes gentle. But on the other hand, jihi goes beyond those for whom you're closely connected. Jihi embraces everybody. And this is what this incredible quality will do. It's not flattering or appeasing or giving temporary joy, like giving someone a lolly to suck. It's to give happiness permanently. And this is what you are all trying to do as you teach others about Buddhism. So of course it is this quality of jihi which should be at the base of all social activities, including politics and government and leadership. Then we'd have wise politics, wise social welfare, wise industrial relations. Going back to Mr. Toda, to repeat what he said, the aim of politics should be that everyone should enjoy life to the full in circumstances of their own choice. In the Gosho to Hachiman, Nichiren Daishonin said, Nichiren's sufferings are the sufferings of the entire nation. And this should be the spirit with which we approach our own personal environment, just as it should be the spirit, ideally, of the leaders of our country and the leaders of the whole world. So we can do it because this amazing quality of jihi is already flowing from your life. Let's determine then to let it flow outwards beyond just our minds into action in our own environment. Okay, we'll have a 10-minute break now. At the end of the question that we are considering today, the traveler or guest asks Nichiren Daishonin for proof from the sutras to support the opinions that he stated. These opinions were summarized in one sentence that we considered in the last lecture, which is the bottom right-hand column of page 8 in your study materials. I'll ask John to read it to you now.
The people of today all turn their backs upon what is right. To a man, they all give their allegiance to evil. That is the reason why the benevolent deities have abandoned the nation and gone away, why sages leave their places and do not return, and in their stead come devils and demons, disasters and calamities that arise one after another.
Thank you. Like most other people, at that stage in their dialogue, the traveler couldn't understand this. It wasn't in the least realistic to him. It seemed sort of too simple to him. Probably in this day and age, it seems old-fashioned to us. Either way, whether simple or old-fashioned, it had the effect that he couldn't take this in. So it's no wonder that when we talk about this to people who we're discussing Buddhism with, they can't believe it either. It's all too simple, too old-fashioned. In another gosho called Thus I Heard, which was published in the Seikyo Times in January this year, this very month, Nichiren Daishonin talks about this. Just listen to what he said.
Therefore, when I expounded it, people refused to believe it, thinking that it must be a false teaching. This is perfectly understandable. For example, if a lowly soldier had announced that he had seduced the beautiful court lady Wang Chao Chung, no one would have believed it. Similarly, people cannot believe that a priest of such lowly birth could expound Nammyoho Renge Kyo, the heart of the Lotus Sutra, which even Tien Tai and Dengyo, who ranked as highly as ministers and court nobles, did not propagate.
So it seems too simple, it seems old-fashioned, But in fact, of course, it's unbelievably deep. Nichiren Daishonin's answer to the problems of the world is based on the Buddha's view of society in its relation with the entire universe. Sensei, let's say, for those of you who are perhaps guests here, President Ikeda, who is the leader of our lay society, is going to Moscow very shortly. This will be, I think, his 4th visit. And he's also going to Sofia. And then he's coming over to Western Europe to visit all of us and to go to Rome. I heard 3 days ago that President Reagan would very much like to see him and talk to him. Before Mao Zedong died, he corresponded with President Ikeda. And so, though he didn't reply, a number of letters were sent by Sensei to President Nixon in his time. What is he trying to do? He is trying to establish the ultimate truth in the minds of these world leaders. First, he must get their friendship. Then he must get their trust. And then he can try to begin to make them see the ultimate truth. This is the purpose of all these activities which he undertakes. The gosho we've chosen as the gosho for President Ikeda's visit when he comes to the United Kingdom is, "My disciples, you should know and believe this. It is not that Nichiren is noble, but that the Lotus Sutra possesses supreme power." I believe that President Ikeda lives that sentence in his every action, and I would like to feel that more and more each one of us lives it in our own lives. "My disciples, you should know and believe this. It is not that Nichiren is noble, but that the Lotus Sutra possesses supreme power." Inevitably, when we first talk to someone about Buddhism, they can't understand the power of the Gohonzon. How could they? Nor could we when we were first introduced to Buddhism. So inevitably, they tend to argue on a fairly obvious, sort of shallow or even emotional level. It's a similar thing I was thinking when I was preparing this lecture to the time, and this is going back a bit, to the time when my father was trying to persuade his parents to have electricity in the house instead of gas. And they'd been living in this gloomy house, of course, for years, with guttering gas burners. You've no idea what it was like. None of you ever saw it, I suppose. And it was unsafe, really dangerous, smelly. But they didn't want electricity. They didn't want a brighter light to begin with. This is what they were used to. They thought this was life, living in a sort of guttering gloom. But, of course, in the end, I'm glad to say my father won, and they had electricity, and they were just overwhelmed. They were overjoyed. All they had to do was to press a little switch on the wall, and everything became brilliantly lively and light. But until they had seen that and experienced it, they couldn't believe it, however much my poor father struggled away to try and convince them. In a way, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? We mustn't get angry. We mustn't get upset. It is natural that people cannot accept this easily. So therefore, the guest asked Nichiren Daishonin for proof. In his case, he was living in a Buddhist land, and he asked for documentary or historical proof. In our case, members, guests, and so on may ask for books or papers to read, but in the end, we know the only thing is for them to try it and to experience actual proof of the power of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in their own lives. And we know it will never fail if they sincerely challenge it. So in any case, through all this, gradually the guest understood, just like we hope the people we're talking to understand. So we've talked about government and leaders and politics. Let's just have a quick look at social life itself. The ultimate truth, if it is the ultimate truth, of course must affect every aspect of life. Family life, our social life, the whole country and the whole world. And this occurs through, doesn't it, the human revolution. The reformation of our life through activating life force, wisdom and compassion, and ridding ourselves of the three poisons of greed and anger and stupidity and ignorance. Fundamental to this human revolution at some point in it is a growing understanding that life is actually eternal, that you cannot destroy life, though the physical self must, like all physical things, disintegrate and decay in the end. Through understanding that life is eternal, then the three poisons gradually disappear from someone's life. Let's take greed. We realize, once we know that life is eternal, that we're going to leave everything behind anyway, even our underwear. What's the point in being greedy and grabbing at the expense of others? This is a natural adjustment as we come to understand the eternity of life. Then anger. Why should we be competitive and ruthless and destructive when more and more we find ourselves wanting happiness for everybody? The power of the Gohonzon working in us will naturally lead to this. And finally, fear. Fear caused by the third of the three poisons, ignorance and stupidity. The fear of death goes when you really understand that life is eternal. Therefore, you fear nothing else. So these are the three poisons which will disperse once eternal life becomes a realistic, living thing in one's own mind. And of course, through ridding ourselves of the three poisons, we change our unhappy karma. And boundless wisdom and compassion can begin to flow absolutely freely, more and more and more, as we go through this steady progress of reformation. So, in relation to the universe, eternity of life and our understanding of it is particularly important. Buddhism explains that the universe is an eternally living thing, a living body, a living organism, if you like, of boundless size. And it's supported by a myriad other independent yet interdependent organisms. We are one of those organisms. Every other living entity, every other living thing is an organism, each with its own environment, each of those environments overlapping and supporting each other. This is the Buddhist view, in a nutshell, of the universe. And it is the great life force of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo that keeps it vibrantly living and progressing and developing more and more valuably if that life force is undeterred by the effect of destruction and negativity. So life force is made up or generates many other forces that are at work in the universe. An obvious one is gravity. We all know, and science knows all about that. Sound waves are another force in the universe that's at work. The pull of the moon on the tides is another example of a force of the universe at work. the sun's nourishment to ourselves and to plants. These are all universal forces at work. But on top of these very obvious ones, there are a myriad others, much more subtle, much less obvious, that are at work in and around us 24 hours of the day. These are what we call the Shoten Zenjin, or, to give it its old-fashioned name, the Buddhist gods. By striving to follow a positive course of life, these forces will protect us, because their very nature is aiming towards creation and progress and value. Mr. Toda once said, "Whenever I do gongyo, I feel that all the Buddhist gods are lined up either side of me. And as I bow to the gonzen, they bow with me." We feed the forces of the universe with our positive force generated through our gongyo and daimoku. Then they will work for value for us, rather than working against us or disappearing altogether if we're in a negative or destructive state. This is what it means in this gosho when it says that the sages and the gods leave the country. If people are negative, then the forces of value will disappear because they have nothing to feed them, nothing to work on, nothing to relate to, nothing to be in rhythm with. This is why in the very first introduction of his novel, The Human Revolution, President Ikeda wrote, "A great revolution in character, in just a single man, will help achieve a change in the destiny of a nation, and further will cause a change in the destiny of all mankind. This is the main theme of my story," he said. One person working in rhythm with the forces of the universe can change everything in his own environment and an increasing number of things further and further out from his own particular life. So likewise, at the end of this gosho, the RISSHO ANKOKU RON, the guest says, by that time he's shakubuku'd and he's answering his own question, the following lines. I'll ask John to read them. If you want to look at it, it's page 32 of your materials.
Therefore you must quickly reform the tenets that you hold in your heart and embrace the one true vehicle, the single good doctrine of the Lotus Sutra. If you do so, then the threefold world will all become the Buddha land, and how could a Buddha land ever decline? The regions in the 10 directions will all become treasure realms, and how could a treasure realm ever suffer harm? If you live in a country that knows no decline or diminution, in a land that suffers no harm or disruption, then your body will find rest and security, and your mind will be calm and untroubled. You must believe my words. Heed what I say.
This is the human revolution, isn't it? And I'm going to ask John to read another extract from a different gosho called On Practicing the Buddha's Teachings.
In that time, because all people chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo together, the wind will not beleaguer the branches or boughs, nor will the rain fall hard enough to break a clod. The world will become as it was in the ages of Fu Si and Shen Nung in ancient China. Disasters will be driven from the land, and the people will be rid of misfortune. They will also learn the art of living long, fulfilling lives. Realize that the time will come when the truth will be revealed that both the person and the law are unaging and eternal. There cannot be the slightest doubt about the Sutra's solemn promise of a peaceful life in this world.
This is the whole purpose of what we practice and what we teach. The whole purpose of Buddhism. Of course, there'll be rainstorms. Of course, there'll be rough seas. But because of the natural wisdom and compassion flowing in the lives of the people, they will be able to overcome any such natural events. In another gosho, the same one I referred to earlier, Thus I Heard, Nichiren Daishonin says, "You may not know this, but the crow, the most despised of birds, can recognize omens of good and evil events that will occur during the year, which the eagle and the hawk cannot." The crow, that ordinary black bird, compared with the glorious eagle. And then he goes on, "A snake is no match for a dragon or an elephant, but it can foresee the coming of a flood 7 days in advance." This is natural wisdom. In another gosho, Nichiren Daishonin talks about the paths that the birds follow in the sky and the tracks that the fish follow in the depths of the ocean. Neither those paths nor those tracks can we in our ignorance see. We are still blind, yet we have the ability to understand everything in us. This is what Buddhism is saying. So despite science and technology, mankind needs the ultimate truth in order to be able to understand this world and live in it creatively and valuably and happily. Our progress is chaotic at the moment. We must go out and teach, mustn't we? So, of course, all that I've said in this last part of the lecture has been based on the Buddhist principle of Esho Funi. Esho, E-S-H-O, Funi, F-U-N-I. This principle covers our relationship with each other, with everything else around us, with the entire universe. And it concerns our relationship with those forces of the universe that I mentioned earlier. So, eho, of the word esho, I should explain, is a combination of two words, eho, E-H-O, and shoho, S-H-O-H-O. Esho, of Esho Funi, is a combination of eho and shoho. Eho means dependent on. A of eho means dependent on, and ho is reward. Dependent on something else for reward. Eho. Shoho, sho of shoho means entity. Ho again means reward. In other words, the entity in itself is rewarding. So shoho, the entity and the reward, is the entity with its ability to gain reward or good fortune built into it. Shoho is us, the entity. Eho, that thing which is dependent on something else for reward, is our environment. Eho. Shoho and eho are different entities, us and our environment, yet they are absolutely inseparable. Every action on my part affects my environment. Just as every word I'm saying at the moment, I hope has some effect on all of you who are in my environment at this point of time. Funi, of Esho Funi, means to yet not to. To yet not to. In other words, two things which are inseparable. Esho Funi therefore means the inseparability of an entity, that's a living entity, and its environment. So Nichiren Daishonin said shoho is like our body, and eho is like the shadow. When the body moves, the shadow moves. When the body is stationary, the shadow is stationary. The body being us, the shadow being our environment. So when we bow to the Gohonzon, according to the principle of Esho Funi, our environment bows as well. When we're angry, our environment will be equally upset. When we're in the state of Buddha, our environment will join us in the Buddha state as well. So, of course, we can prove this for ourselves in our daily life. And it is through this, the workings of this principle, that we gain benefit. We find as we practice that our environment does begin to work with us. This benefit is caused by that, by the environment bending towards us rather than against us or away from us. So of course the environment also has a great effect on the entity or person. Science is fully aware of that, isn't it? In medicine, there is a greater and greater understanding of the effect of the environment on us. Such things as, which before were sort of unknown quantities or rather laughed at, but such things as thunder causing headaches, snow or impending snow causing a feeling of unease, an east wind causing tension and dryness, which are all experienced, I expect, by many of us here in one form or another, were not recognized before by medical science so much in its early, rather over-scientific days. Likewise, we know, or the scientists know, or are beginning to know about how life began through the action and reaction of simple elements working upon each other. In sociology today, we're beginning to understand the awful effect of tower blocks, for example, on the minds of people, the environment's effect on the person. And in psychology, there are many other such examples, child-parent relationships and so on. But in the gosho, in one gosho, it says that the circulation of our blood is related to the tides. Did you know that? Amazing, isn't it? I haven't had time to follow that one up yet. So, as you can see, the great relationship between the entity and the environment is very clear to us, very clear to science, so far as the environment's effect on us is concerned. But the other way round is the thing that has not been clear. So the environment can easily sway us, but can it give us happiness? Of course the answer is no. The environment is always changing. What may be great today disappears tomorrow. So what matters is that we are solid and strong at the center of our environment and basing on our life on the highest state of man. Then everything in that environment will be affected in just the same way as the environment can affect us. The same forces, the same linkage is there. So of course, philosophy or religion's concern is with the inner man. How can we achieve that highest state and thus make sure that our environment reacts in the highest state as well? And this is what the practice of Buddhism is all about. This, of course, is the key to happiness, isn't it? So if we reveal Buddha in our own life, the environment will reflect Buddha by the unchanging, inescapable law of Esho Funi. So if you take, for example, a house, its atmosphere depends on the people living there, doesn't it? A house can feel joyful when you go into it, or it can feel spooky and creepy. This isn't the house itself. This is the reflection of the lives of the people who are living there. So, without a doubt, through the law of cause and effect and its relationship with the principle of esho funi, we get no more nor less than what we deserve. So I hope from all that we've said this afternoon, we can feel more and more that this universe that we're a part of is an incredible, vibrating world of life, with a myriad entities, each an organism in itself, and each with an environment, and all those environments overlapping one another, so that what I do now and say now affects not just me or Porchester Hall or you, but the whole universe. If I live a life filled with the three poisons, then the three poisons will be rampant in my environment too. But if I struggle to elevate my state of life to its highest, or Buddha, then that is what the environment will reflect. This, of course, is how conspicuous and inconspicuous benefits flow into our lives through the practice to the Gohonzon. It's so simple yet. It's so incredibly vast and deep, isn't it? This is why people find it so difficult to understand and believe in. Yet it is natural. That's why it's simple. And of course, in the end, the only way is for people to try it and get the actual proof. So, Nichiren Daishonin, towards the end of his life, on the beach at Tatsunokuchi, proved man's relationship with the universe. As you know, he was saved from being beheaded when the sword was actually above his head through this incredible, brilliant comet shooting across the sky and lighting everything up brilliantly, so that the soldiers fled and their horses broke loose and ran, and there was absolute chaos. He proved through his strong prayer, which he'd carried out just before he got to the execution place, that man is totally interconnected with the universe and everything in it. So, of course, scientists know that comets and stars have an effect on the Earth. But what they don't know is why such phenomena occur at a particular time. It was at a particular time that that brilliant comet shot across the sky and saved Nichiren Daishonin. And just to make sure everyone understood it, a second occurrence took place on the next night. This is all recorded in a gosho called On the Buddha's Behavior. It's very exciting to read. If you haven't already read it, please read it. It's a thriller in itself. But I'll ask John just to read this bit about the second occurrence.
Now it was the night of the 13th. There were scores of warriors stationed around my lodging and in the main garden. Because it was almost the middle of the 9th month, the moon was very round and full. I went out into the night garden, and there, turning toward the moon, recited the Jigage portion of the Juryo chapter. Then I spoke briefly about the merits and faults of the various sects, and about the teachings of the Lotus Sutra. I said, "You, the god of the moon, participated in the ceremony of the Lotus Sutra, did you not? When the Buddha expounded the Hoto chapter, you obeyed his order. And in the Zokuri chapter, when the Buddha laid his hand on your head 3 times, you vowed to fulfill the command to transmit and protect the Lotus Sutra. Are you not the same God? Would you have an opportunity to fulfill your vow if it were not for me? Now that you see me in this situation, you should joyfully rush forward to shield the votary of the Lotus Sutra and thereby fulfill your vow to the Buddha. It is incredible that you have not yet done anything. If nothing is done to bring this country to justice, I will never return to Kamakura. If you do not intend to do anything for me, how can you continue to shine on complacently? How do you read the following passages from the sutras? The Daijuku Sutra states, the sun and moon do not show their brightness. The Ninno Sutra reads, both the sun and the moon shall act discordantly. The Saisho Sutra says, the 33 heavenly gods will be enraged. What is your answer, moon? What is your answer? Then, as though in answer, a large star, bright as the morning star, fell from the sky and struck a branch of the plum tree in front of me. The soldiers, astounded, jumped down from the veranda, fell on their faces in the garden, or ran behind the house. Immediately, a fierce wind started up, raging so violently that the whole island of Enoshima seemed to roar. The sky shook, echoing with a sound like pounding drums.
This, I might say, is also recorded in government records of those times. So really Nichiren Daishonin was proving for us all, this was the purpose of Tatsunoguchi and the purpose of this incident, to prove to us that if we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with our whole heart and do Gongyo and practice exactly as the Buddha taught, then the Shoten Zenjin, the forces of the universe, will definitely work with us and ensure that we can continue our life and fulfill our purpose. Please, when you're against difficulties, chant with that in mind. Of course, Nichiren Daishonin is saying how his mind was working as he was chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That is the way our mind should work when we find ourselves in a tight corner. With that determination, that strength, then there is nothing that you won't overcome. This, I know myself, many of you here have proved it for yourselves. This is the way the universe will work if we're moving in a positive direction with the intent of creating value wherever we go. So I think that's a fitting ending. With that sort of attitude, this world can be totally transformed. And our task is to go on teaching and telling others about the ultimate truth until we have enough people in the world to prevent disaster through activating the great life force of Buddha, which exists in every single human being if they only knew it. Thank you very much indeed for listening patiently. Many thanks. Thank you very much. Sancho.